So, do you think it's ridiculous that someone can take a CPR class and then 2 years later is when they expire? Well, if you haven't used CPR in 2 years, I think we expire a whole lot earlier. If you agree with me on that, hit that like button because no, these are perishable skills and they expire earlier than 2 years. So we see that with first aid, we see that with CPR, and how about our rescue skills? Well, folks, we are going to take a look at that today. So today is all about in-service training, and welcome to the Dive Locker. It is great to have you here today. My name is Tec Clark, and that is what we are going to do today, is go over in-service training. What is it, who's it for, and how do we do it? I'm going to give you 5 points of how to set up your own in-service trainings so that you and your staff and your team can be absolutely proficient and ready for rescue at any time. Now, so first of all, what is in-service training? We may have heard this term floating around before out there because there are certain professions that do this. You're going to see in-service training being done by law enforcement, military, EMS, fire rescue, ocean rescue, lifeguards, you name it. Health professions, anywhere where two things exist. First of all, where there's adrenaline in rescue mode. And number two, where there's perishable skills. So first of all, as we look at that in the context of what does that mean? Well, why? It's because of this high adrenaline activity that can happen when we have to come to the aid of people that are within our duty of care, that we provide them with some type of first aid. These can be very traumatic situations. And so as that is developing and we don't work on that all the time, there is a lot of emotionality that comes. And with this, spikes in adrenaline. Those spikes in adrenaline can do all kinds of wild and funky things to the rescuer, including making them completely bonk or freeze and not do anything, or go tunnel vision, not be able to get the whole picture, or fine motor skills go out the window and now you can't even put on gloves easily. There's so many things that take place, or forgetting what to do on stuff. There's just so much that happens when adrenaline starts to surge and we need to perform proper rescues. So by doing in-service training and by doing these rescues in a more realistic sense, now all of a sudden we're bringing down that adrenaline dump, that it doesn't happen all the time and it won't take you by surprise and all of that stuff. And the second area is going to be the whole piece of perishable skills. So yes, CPR, putting together an oxygen unit, AEDs, running bandages and certain first aid techniques, they are skills that you will forget if you don't do them over time. And so that is a really important part of this in the why do we do in service. Now, what is it? What is in service? Well, as the name applies, it is for professionals to on the job train while they're in service, do their own training to get good at this and do it regularly. Now, what is regularly? Hey, for lifeguards and ocean rescue, they might do something that's in-service training every day. Once a day, there might be something going on that is in-service training. But for others, it could be spaced out more. Hey, look, the thing is that as long as you make it regular and make it a routine, that could be 3 times a year, that could be quarterly, that could be monthly, it doesn't matter. Whatever you think would be the appropriate way to keep you and your team up to skills with your rescue abilities, then make it happen. But here's the other thing. What does this really look like? Well, it's about the realistic scenarios. Look, the number one pushback that I hear about in-service training is that, oh, I teach all the rescue classes. We teach rescue regularly. We're doing a rescue class once a month. We don't need to do this. Oh, I do CPR classes all the time. I'm good. No, that is absolutely not the same. In-service training are realistic scenarios, not in a classroom, on a carpeted floor in air conditioning, pumping on a mannequin. That's not it. No. Same with oxygen delivery or anything else, AED. No. We're talking the realism. The realism of being in a wetsuit, pounding on mannequins, being under a scorching sun, being on a dive boat that is moving while you're trying to do bandaging or tourniquets or CPR or oxygen delivery. You see, when we bring it out into the real world and we're on a beach and now we have to negotiate sand and make sure sand does not get in our component parts or into the patient, this is where it becomes real, and your rescue classes and your CPR classes don't give that realism. You're going to understand why as we put this into place and tell you how to set these up. But realism is the key. Be as realistic as possible in every aspect of these in-service training rescue scenarios, and you will see that they have absolute merit. So here we go. Let's get into the 5 setups that you will need to do your own in-service training and make it absolutely fantastic for your staff. Okay, number 1 is environment. You want to do in-service training at every environment you do dive training and dive supervision operations. Every environment. So that might be the pool. That might be the beach. That might be the lake, the ocean, the quarry, the dive boat, you name it. Wherever you do your operations is where in-service training needs to be. Now that's what we do. We rotate it. We'll do pool in-service training. We do beach in-service training, lake in-service training, boat in-service training, and we round robin them and alternate so that everybody gets the in-service training scenarios at each of those environments. So pick the environments that you do this at. Number 2 is the players. Who are the players that are involved? Well, you have a team basically on this. First of all, you need the responders themselves. The first responders are the people to come to the rescue. They're the ones being evaluated, put on the spot to do the rescue itself. So for a dive class and to do a scenario that is class-based, you would have the instructor, maybe an assistant instructor or 2, or an instructor and a dive master or 2 instructors and 2 dive masters. Whatever is your normal routine at your dive center or your dive operation, that's how you should run this. So that's your first team, the responders, the people that are going to respond to the rescue and help out. Second, you're going to need victim or victims, plural. That's right. So these are the folks that have the problem. Whatever that nature injury is that you're going to manifest, they are the ones that have that. And so what we want them to do is actually just be the role of a victim. They are going to be the real problem. If there's trauma involved, they can scream and cry and everything. But if they're unconscious, teach them how to be dead weight. Right? That's how we want that realism to come in for those victims. Then we're also going to have the bystanders, as we call them. Now, bystanders can be in a couple forms. First of all, let's say you're doing a class scenario. They might be the other students in the class other than the victim. Or they may be people that are in the bleachers. Or they may be bystanders on the dive boat. Maybe they are family members bubble watching. Or maybe they are other divers on the boat aside from the ones that you're supervising or in a class with. So you come up with bystanders. And so those bystanders, you can make as many of them as you want, as few of them as you want, and then you can change their dynamics. So you want to have some other people involved other than just rescue and victim. That's boring. So put bystanders in there. You also are going to need to have evaluators. And so evaluators are the ones that are actually watching this whole thing go down. They're the ones that will sit with notes and take notes for everything going on. The good, the bad is all being done in note taking. Also, I highly recommend evaluators time every one of these skills as we go through, because then you can compare, and in those debriefings, you can say, hey, it took you this long to get the victim to the surface, it took you this long to get an O2 unit on, blah, blah, blah. Really good measurement. So have someone that's an evaluator doing that. And by the way, there's going to be chaos and so much going on. It's much better to have 2 or more evaluators to be able to take notes and catch everything that happens. And then finally, I like to recommend pro bystanders. Now, what would a pro bystander be? That's a professional. So this could be where you actually engage with EMS, you actually engage with fire rescue or Coast Guard or anybody that could come alongside and be a part of this. Lifeguards are a perfect example. If you're doing beach operations or a pool operation and you have lifeguards at your facility, tie them in to the scenario. Let them be a part of it. If you get with their supervisors, usually they are happy to help out these scenarios because they get to see your EAP. They get to kind of learn what you're doing and so forth. And then if you tie together, now you might both figure out that your EAP might need to change when scuba is present or freediving is present. You see, this is golden. So wherever you can, try to get professionals to help out with your in-service trainings. All right, that was number 2. Now we're on to number 3, and number 3 is equipment. What equipment should you have? Well, again, the key is realism. We want as realistic as equipment as we can possibly muster up for this. So if you have an O2 unit, you want an active and working O2 unit. Now, this could be your training unit, but make it open, active, working, etc. All right. Now, this is also a point where people come up and say, oh yeah, we do that, but we put air in our O2 so that we save money and it's not as dangerous. No, do real O2. The reason you want to use real oxygen in your scenarios is because if you go to air to make it safer, now there's not the respect for the gas that there should be. That's why you want to run real oxygen. That way they turn it on slowly. That way they are watching pressure. That way if there's a leak, they are going to shut it down immediately. That's how we want them to operate, with healthy respect. Plus, when it comes time to use the real unit, they won't hesitate. It won't be like, oh, there's a difference now. No. So please do not use air in your oxygen to do realistic scenarios. Use real oxygen. Second thing is your first aid kits. Make your first aid kits to be identical to your real first aid kit. So if you're using a dummy or a trainer kit, put all the same parts in all the same places. That way, that motor memory is there to open it up and know where things are. That's what we're going for here. Yes, is it a cost? Is it an investment? Sure it is. But it will pay off in the long run. Trust me. So think about that, having a demo first aid kit that is exactly like your real one. Then AED. Obviously, we're not going to use the real AED, so this is where you use a dummy and a demo AED, or a trainer AED, as we call them. They work, you got the battery, it still talks to you and all that stuff and everything like that, but it just won't deliver a charge. So do that. Now, with this, you want the AED to also be in the same places that you would keep an AED normally. So for instance, when we do our pool in-service trainings, the real AED is in a case, and that case opens and flashing lights and sirens go off. We will see, and research has proven, that when that happens, adrenaline spikes in rescuers because of the alarms and the flashing lights. So this is going to happen to your folks. You want that realism to happen. So you put the dummy AED in there, you want the alarms and sirens to go off, and then they use that as part of the rescue scenario. That's how you do it. Okay? So this is a huge and important piece of what that equipment looks like. The other thing on equipment is that you want to have a phone or a means of communication. Now, this can be done in many ways. Phones are important. How many times have you seen somebody do this? Yeah, I just called 911. No, you didn't. So here's what we want to do. Make it more realistic. So what we do is when we're on the boat or at the beach or something like that, we have a dummy cell phone. Dummy cell phone is great to get wet and sandy. Yeah, it got put through the washing machine. And so it's dead. So this is what we use for a trainer. So the person grabs it and dials. Now what do we have? We have an actual evaluator with a 911 script that is standing there and says, 911, what is your emergency? And goes through the whole 911 prompt, listening back and forth, talking, holding that person. Now, if they have that cell phone there, now they're also trying to set up an O2 kit. They've got to put that phone to their ear, and here they go, right? All of a sudden they realize how hard that is. That is realistic. The other way you can do the realism side of the house is you can actually use someone's phone and they can call another number to a friend or an evaluator that is playing this role. Now that evaluator answers the phone and reads the 911 script. What's funny in this situation is if you're on a moving, rocking and rolling boat, the person might not be able to hear you and says, I got to get to a spot where I can hear the operator. Now they've taken themselves out of the rescue. Very realistic scenario, right? And then the third option is, what if you're at a pool and you've got a hardline phone? Most pools have an emergency phone. So what we do with ours is they have to go to the box phone and they have to activate it, if you will. They don't actually push the button, but they go up to it, they pretend to push the button, and we put our 911 operator right there to talk with them through that. And that holds them in that scenario for a while. And then the final things that you can bring in to your equipment side of the house is moulage. That is your cool stuff like fake blood and fake cuts and scrapes and all of that stuff. These go a long way to add realism, especially on the fake blood side of the house, because now it really puts into place, oh yeah, we need to glove up. Oh yeah, we need pocket masks. So whatever you can do to make that realism happen, do it. It's really important. And for those of you that have taken the DFA, Diving First Aid for Professionals course, DFA Pro, there's a whole section in on that, on moulage and what you can do to do some cool marine life injuries. I'm going to do a whole podcast episode on just moulage for rescue and in-service trainings because it's so cool and it's so much fun. And I'll show you how to do things like make jellyfish tentacles and fun stuff like that. It's awesome. So those are the components that you need for your equipment. So here's another amazing tip for equipment that you'll need for in-service training, and that is not only a CPR mannequin, but used wetsuits. Why do we want used wetsuits? Well, because we want to practice cutting them off of a patient when we need to do CPR or when we need to expose the chest for those AED pads. So here's what you do. You keep a stock of nasty old wetsuits that you would normally throw out. Keep them around. Put them on the CPR mannequin. After you've egressed a real person from the water, now swap out that real person for a CPR mannequin. Now practice cutting off or cutting open the wetsuit or exposure suit, right? It could be anything. You could make it wetsuits. It could be old dry suits. It could be skin suits, anything you want, rash guards, whatever. But we've got to cut it off of an unresponsive person. So the best way to do that is the T-cut. So right from the neck straight down to the navel, out to the sides, and it will open right up. Another thing to mention about the evaluator's role is that the evaluator needs to be able to stop the exercises at any time. You're the eyes of what's going on, so it's super important to be able to see if someone could potentially be injured in this rescue scenario, or if something could be problematic. Shutting off the O2 if it's leaking or whatever. We once had somebody bring out a real AED out to a victim instead of the dummy AED. So these are things that we have to stop and shut down. So the evaluator's role on that is very important. All right, and number 4 is going to be the scenarios that you actually produce. What are the activities going on? These are going to be how you come up with the creativity side of the house. What would take place? Is it going to be an actual class that's happening? taking place? If so, what is it? Is it a Discover Scuba? Is it a refresher? Is it an open water diver class? Or are you on the dive boat and you've got a dive master supervising a dive in water? Or dive masters are on the boat and no one's in the water. Come up with these activities that are taking place. Now, once you've established the activities taking place, assign the problems that are going to happen. What is the actual thing that's going to go wrong, and what is the injury that's going to take place? We do it all, my friends. We do everything from slips and falls. We do hazardous marine life injuries. We do the serious things like drowning, non-fatal drownings. We'll do decompression sickness, you name it. All the scenarios vary up all the time. In fact, we just did one that was awesome. It was a lightning scenario. So, class underwater, banging on the pool deck, have to come out of the water because of lightning. All right, now the instructors and staff have to get the students out of their gear and into the locker rooms where it's a safe place during a lightning storm. Well, guess what? The problem was, during that time, we had someone hurt their ear on their ascent and be so dizzy that they could not walk to the locker room. We had another person slip and fall on the deck. We had another person step on a bee and now have an allergic reaction. Do you see? So all of a sudden, what's a simple scenario had to be complex, and now all that first aid had to take place in a locker room. It was awesome. We loved it. They loved it. It was absolutely a great time. So really identify what you want to be the problems that they address, those first aid solutions where they turn from a victim into a patient and now they're being cared for. And then is going to be the distractions. These are what we call curveballs. These are the things that surprise the rescue. They're different. They're out of the norm. They're not what they learned in the class. What are the distractions and curveballs? Well, you just brought up the other class members, and here's the unconscious diver. How are we going to get the classmates out of the water? Are they screaming and crying because that is a brother, a sister, a family member, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a sorority brother or sister, sort of fraternity? It just goes on and on and on what you can do and how you can do it. And then you can make those bystanders sitting on the side the same thing. Now they are all emotional. Now they are all freaking out and in on the rescue and trying to scream next to everybody. And so how are they handled? What about a curveball of if someone comes up and says, hey, I'm a medical student. Hey, I'm a doctor. Hey, I'm a nurse. Do they engage with them? Will they help? Won't they help? Etc. We throw things like speaking and language problems. So now there's a language barrier. And now you're trying to communicate to somebody, but they don't understand what's happening. And you're wanting to put oxygen on them, but they don't understand your language. Amazing stuff. So all these curveballs are just fantastic. One of the great ones, too, is cell phone. Someone is a bystander and they've got a cell phone and they're holding it up to everybody in the rescue. How does your staff respond? Will someone jump up and be like, stop filming, stop filming? Hopefully not. Anybody can film, even though it's not right or moral or anything like that. But the deal is, don't focus on a person filming. Focus on the rescue and the patient. That's the most important thing. So we do these curveballs to see how people react. And that is a great part of how you make your scenarios come to life. And then number 5 is timing. Timing. How does this all go down in timing wise? Well, first of all, you have to be thinking, well, timing, why is this such a big thing? Because this takes a while for a few reasons. First of all, is that we want to set this up so that you have those realistic 911 calls, right, that come in, but then we have to have a proper end time. What does an end time look like? Well, as we all know, an end time of a rescue scenario is when EMS or other medical professionals take over, right? So what we do is we look at what is the average EMS response time in our county. Now that's for our land operations like our lake and our pool. Well, it's 8 minutes. So what we do is when the 911 call is terminated and the 911 operator says, we have activated EMS response, you can hang up now. That's when we start a new clock that is 8 minutes long. Now we will not have the end scenario until 8 minutes later, a person playing the role of an EMT or paramedic comes up and says, fire rescue, what's going on here? That's when we end scene and end scenario. Now that's 8 minutes for our county. What is your county? Look it up. You can find the average EMS response time for 911 calls, etc., and do that research and you'll find it. Now for the dive boats, different story. What about if we're relying on US Coast Guard? Come up with 2 different scenarios. What if the Coast Guard comes and meets you? How long would that normally be? Or what if Coast Guard isn't available and your dive boat needs to make it back into shore? Yep, these could be 40-minute scenarios. And that is awesome. So to work a scenario for 40 minutes, yes, people are exhausted and flabbergasted and everything like that. But guess what? It's real. That's what it's about. So realism, again, is the key. So we're going to keep that time buffer in there. The second thing, and one of the most important things, and I can't stress this enough, everybody, for the time management piece of this is that everybody has to do a rescue twice. Everybody has to do a rescue twice. So round robin it, victims become rescuers, bystanders become students, however you want to rotate it, whatever group sizes and dynamics, make that happen. But trust me, you must do it twice, at least twice for every rescuer. They have to do scenario 1, fail, but then they have to do scenario 2 and improve on all of those areas that you've been taking notes on and helping them out with. That is part of the secret sauce. So you've got to do it 2 times. Give enough time for that. And then finally is leave enough time for debriefings. You've got to have debriefings. This is where you go over those notes. And if every evaluator has notes, there's a lot to talk about here and to decompress. So go over those very thoroughly. Yes, sometimes it's hard stuff to hear because there's a lot of problems, but we're going to fix those problems. We're going to tell them how to do it right. We might even show them new ways to do things. This is why debriefings are so important, and they might take some time to do. Okay, so those are the 5 ways that you're going to set up your in-service training scenarios. Now, I'm going to stress the secret sauce of this. Number 1 is make it a fail-safe environment. Secret sauce, number 1 tip. When you brief this ahead of time, make sure that people know that this is a fail-safe environment. If they fail, it's okay. This is not about evaluating and firing people or all this bad stuff. It is that we are going to improve. That's what it's about. You want to tell them that after tonight and all the mistakes that they're going to make in scenario 1, the first time out, then we do scenario 2, we get to go home. We get to have pizza and beer, and we get to have a good time. However, if they did those mistakes in a real rescue, they're not going and having pizza and beer. They're going home. They're not going to eat. They're not going to sleep. They're not going to have a good time at all, knowing that they botched up rescues and that the outcome could have been different if they had done things differently. So this is why we are okay with failure. That has to be conveyed to everybody. That's number 1. Number 2 is you've got to do the scenarios twice for every rescuer. Time number 1, they go through all of this problems, and here's the corrections. Time number 2, that AED screaming doesn't throw them at all. They expect it. They expect a chaos of an emotional bystander. They expect that the 911 call is going to take this long. They expect all of these things, and now the second time, those expectations are there. The surprises are gone. It's the exact same scenario. They work it through, and then they are better. They're more prepared. They're calmer, and they're more efficient. And how do we prove it? Because we took those times. The evaluators, by doing the timing, now can go back and it doesn't fail. Scenario number 2 is always faster and more efficient. Now they made the call faster. They got them out of the water faster. They got the AED on faster. They got the O2 delivery faster. It's awesome. So this is where they walk away being empowered by in-service training, because when you leave on the good note of the second time, now they are like, yes, I've got that. Don't leave them after time one negative with all these wrong things. Let them correct them. That's secret sauce number 2. You've got to do it twice. And then finally, secret sauce number 3 is that you must give debriefings. Debriefings are key to this. So those debriefings, they can be harsh, they can be critical, but they have to be accurate and they have to be about improvement. Always give the positive. Don't do just negative notes, evaluators. You've got to do the positive too. And so balance that positive and negative and flesh it out. And just keep those notes going, because that will make your debriefings very effective. Remember, we're talking 10-minute minimum like scenarios, especially with EMS calls on a fast EMS response time like we have at 8 minutes. What about that Coast Guard 40 minutes? You're not going to remember everything. Not even close. So keep those notes. The debriefings are the key to making people feel like they have achieved. So that is what it's about. This is huge. Now, let me show you something. This photo is of our actual dive team. This is right after an in-service scenario where we had 3 victims. Now, I had just yelled, end scenario, end scene, and notice everybody is laughing. Why is everybody laughing? What's going on there? Because they are rock stars. They do this regularly. And because they do this regularly, they don't mess up. And when they do, they immediately correct it. It's like a dance. If you miss one step in the dance, you don't just run off the dance floor. You keep dancing. So that is what the rescue is about. They keep going, and they are rock stars at it. So look at this picture. You've got those two patients down there, both with O2, but both have emergency blankets on. There was a CPR mannequin that you couldn't see. So 3 victim patients in this scenario. And now look, everybody's got gloves on. You've got pencils because notes were being taken, and pads and notes and all of that. All of that was in place. They knew they did it right. And they were laughing at the curveballs that we threw them. They were like, oh man, you really got me on that one. Can you believe they did this? No, right? That's what we threw at them. And they responded beautifully. They know that they did that great. They know that they are rock stars. Now, the other thing to note here is something really cool. See that bystander in the back? That wasn't one of our actor bystanders. Nope. That was just somebody that happened to be on the dive boat that day. Well, this is what happens. This picture, and every time we do this, doesn't matter where it is, other divers and other dive professionals come up to us and go, I've never seen anything like that. That was amazing. Oh my gosh, who are you guys? How do you do this? What training is this? I want to do this training. Is this rescue? I want to take rescue with you. Is this dive master? I want to take your dive master course. Literally, that's what's going on. So we have this amazing reputation that comes out of us doing this in-service training all over the place. And then not only is it people that want to be a part of our program because they see it, but our reputation carries. And then the places that we go and people that we work with, the professionals like the captains and the lifeguards, they all know what we're about. And we integrate them in our EAPs. And so we're tighter with them, which is just awesome. So we have this built-in beautiful trust that goes on because people respect how seriously we take dive training and dive rescue to this level with our staff to be prepared. So that is absolutely awesomeness, and it works. That picture is just a classic example of how it can be super, super successful and how your team will flourish with doing in-service training. So here's a few things for you with this. First of all, is that if you want to learn a little bit more about this, I did an article in Alert Diver magazine called Dive Training for Professionals. and dive rescue training for professionals. And it is about in-service training. So you can look that up in Alert Diver. Just type in my name, go to Divers Alert Network, Alert Diver, type in my name. You'll see the articles I've written. There's a really good one that goes over this, but there's just a little more reading there. And then another thing that you can do is if you want to get some good ideas for actual diving incidents and problems and scenarios, go also to Divers Alert Network, Alert Diver. Then when you're on Alert Diver, you can do a filter for the articles, and you want to go into the filter that says Incident Insights. It's a column on dive accidents and incidents, and you can read what went wrong and what the outcome was. Those are really cool to look at and engage with and see what that's all about. So there's other sources out there. Dive Training Magazine did lessons and so forth. So there's some really neat things out there to look for and to come up with your own scenarios. So I highly, highly recommend that. So there you go, my friends. That's what in-service training is all about. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm going to put those links to the Alert Diver down in the show notes. But here's what I want you to do. If you are doing in-service training yourself and you're doing scenarios, put them in the comments. What is it you're doing? What cool things, what novel approaches are you doing for your rescue scenarios and your in-service trainings? Put those in the comments so that others can learn from you and see what it is that you're doing. I know you've all got some really cool things out there, so put them in the comments. And remember, like, subscribe, comment, be a part of this community, be a part of the Dive Locker. And I would also love it if you would consider being a patron of the Dive Locker. Sponsor this show by going to patreon.com/the Dive Locker, and you can help support my time and energy producing the show. I hope you find value in every episode. And as a dive professional, you're going to be great. Keep it up. Hey, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Take good care and safe diving, my friends.